Welcome in. It's another Clippers Talk Live. I'm Adam Oslin. Good to be with you guys. A little bit disheveled with the look right now. Still recovering from the drive back with Carlo Jimenez from San Diego last night from Oceanside as the Clippers took down the Brooklyn Nets for their first preseason victory. 115 to 106 was the final. Here on this live, we'll get into that. We're also going to have La Murray on at some point here coming up in just a bit. I want to ask him specifically about that Kawhi Leonard halftime press conference he gave in Hawaii over the weekend and a couple of things that Kawhi Leonard said in it. Just for clarity's sake, I wanted him to play Kawhi interpreter. We already had Miriam Swanson on from the OC Register talking about it, as I should probably put a tweet out for this episode right now so people actually know it's live. We're up. I didn't tell anyone about it. Typically, how I've been doing things lately. I did have the idea of having a specific time every day on Clippers off days to do shows, maybe around 5 o'clock. Frankie Boy 9 says, "What time did you get home last night, Adam? Thanks for the stream last night." You got it. It was fun. Carlo Jimenez was driving my car, and I had the laptop out. And we were talking to you guys for about 45 minutes, I would say, on the way home from Oceanside back to Los Angeles. And everything went all right. Got home safe. So did Big Brother Jake Warner. Appreciate you guys and the company you brought along the ride. It gave us a little bit of wind in our sails, you could say, and made the time go a little bit faster. But on today's show, yeah, I am kind of mulling over some of those options during the season of just on off days. Should I just always do a show at the same time so everybody knows? 5 o'clock, we got Clippers talk. Could it be dependent on the news? I don't know. I just broke into this one today because it's an off day and I got time. And we got time before the Dodgers game at 6. And I wanted to get a little bit more in depth on some players and what happened last night in the Clippers victory. Really cool, first of all. Wanted to shout out Front Wave Arena. And I just could not say enough about what a cool atmosphere that was. I encourage you guys to check out a Clippers game there with the Clippers San Diego team, the San Diego Clippers, their G League affiliate, no longer in Ontario, now in San Diego, back where everything started back in 1978 for the Clippers. It was a really great environment, great atmosphere, great seats. We were on a perch about 20 rows up, center floor. Myself, Carlo Jimenez, Big Brother Jake Warner, the TM crew. And I felt like the fans there, Clipper Nation, was having a pretty damn good time getting to watch Clippers basketball. And some of the guys they will see in the G League perform last night and compete out there. Guys like Jordan Miller, Kobe Brown, Elijah Harkless. Who else am I thinking of? Kai Jones, I'm hoping, is going to pick up that two-way contract. But preview of things to come there for the San Diego Clippers, and it was just a really cool arena. Couldn't be more impressed. Yes, the Clippers have 2 new arenas now. They have their SoCal guest house down there at Front Wave Arena that is more than accommodating, and you should go there to watch basketball. And then they also have the Intuit Dome. I don't know if you heard about this, but a pretty big deal opening up next week. Monday is the first preseason game. I know they've had concerts there, but we haven't seen basketball there yet. So we'll get into the ball game. Frankie Boy 9 said, "I saw a lot of highlights of Kai Jones. You think he's better than Mo?" No, I don't at this point. As much as I'm going to give Kai credit for bouncing back, and Coach Lou said he was better and even got better in that game as things went along yesterday, it still is a guy that looks very raw. Yes, you see the freakish athleticism. He can run like a gazelle. He can put his head on the rim. He has Stromile Swift vibes for me with some of the dunks. It's impressive. It also was a team in the Brooklyn Nets that if he didn't perform like that against, I would have serious concerns because the Nets were out there, guys, with a bunch of dudes who were 6'8" at best. They didn't have a lot of height at all. And Carlo Jimenez and I were talking about it and saying, this Clippers team could win pretty easily if they just played through Ivica Zubac right now. And I actually think they went away from him this time intentionally just because they wanted to work on other pieces and parts and dimensions of their offense and not make it so easy on themselves to win a ball game by just playing through the big man because there was nobody to match him on the other side. Now, Kai Jones, a little bit different of a story. This is someone who is really trying to develop and progress and just started playing basketball when he was 15, was a track star. You can see it out there. One of the things that I think is really encouraging about Kai Jones and his game is that he can run all day. He has the cardio because of his track and field background. I believe it was a triple jumper, some other events where he can just absolutely run up and down the floor. And this is something I think is underrated when you talk about athleticism. This was something I always bring up with Phil Jackson, who talked about this with Dennis Rodman back in the day. He would always say Dennis Rodman, not Michael, not Scotty, was the best athlete on the team because his wind, because his oxygen. He could run all day long. Kai Jones can do that. That's not an issue. We know the vertical threat he is. What I liked and what some of the improvements were, and I told you this against the game against Honolulu, I knew the coaching staff would get on him about it because his screens were just basically ghost screens. They weren't physical at all. He wasn't putting his body on anybody. He wasn't moving anybody. He wasn't screening, really. They just were absolutely slip screens that he was showing off out there. And that can't happen. When you have a guy that has a physical presence like he can have because of his body type, he has to use it to his advantage, or else what's the point? What are we talking about? It just doesn't mean much. That Mexican Nara said, any insight on Harkless signing and for the love of Ray J being waived? What does this mean for Kai Jones? And for Aldonis Williams, I don't, he's on, an Exhibit 10 contract. So he's trying to make the team. I think it's somebody who's going to be the G League once again with Elijah Harkless. I don't think it's anything more than that because for a guy to break in and be a guard on this Clippers team when they already have so many of them, I just doubt we're going to see him with the big club, even though he does have an NBA skill with his ability to guard. And actually last season, I believe I had some G League stats that I put out just the other day that I was looking at with the Clippers. I screenshot it for myself. Elijah Harkless last year in the G League, something of note, in his 20 games, 22 minutes a game, was getting 11 points. But more importantly, he shot 43% from three in the G League. So can he be a 3-and-D guy? That's what's interesting about him. I still think it is a long shot for, and I'll ask Law Murray about this when we have him on a little bit later in this show, because he's only 6'3". I think his defense is real, but he's also limited because of his size, and I just don't see him breaking into this guard rotation right now where the Clippers already have probably one or two guys too many. Maddox says Kawhi was the best player with the Raptors in the NBA. Okay. Kind of random. I agree. I think most people thought after they won the championship, he was the best player in the world and the best Raptors player ever. I mean, you can argue he was there for 1 year. So is it really much of a legacy? You can make the argument because they won the championship. I don't know. Most people still say Vince Carter. Some say DeMar DeRozan. Some say Kyle Lowry. But I want to go back to Kai Jones and just some of the plays he was able to make, because I know this was a game last night that was almost a radio exclusive. It was on Clippers Court Vision. I don't know how many of you were watching on there, but things started off like this with Kai Jones. First of all, he missed on a lob from James Harden, wasn't ready for it, but then he got the block on the other end immediately. That's the type of hustle I love seeing. He ran back and got a block right after missing that. Then he missed a couple of easy ones at the rim where he was trying to lay it up, and he just has to dunk that. I think somebody got in his ear shortly afterwards, and I could see right away he was setting better screens. He had a screen for KPJ that Kai then got a dunk off of as KPJ missed the jumper that I like seeing. It was a strong, impactful screen. And guys, if you think this is, getting into the minutia a little bit, well, these are really important things for a young player, and especially a guy who's trying to get the two-way spot. You got to screen if you're a big man on this team. That's going to run a lot of high pick and roll. Kai Jones had to be much better there. He was. What happened in Honolulu, I don't know if he just was rusty. He hadn't played much basketball in a while at this level. It's not a YMCA run. It's not some of the clips you've seen out there with him and KPJ playing at a 24-hour fitness or whatever it was, where nobody's playing that hard. And yes, you can set those little brush screens, or what were they called in the Chappelle Show skit with Charlie Murphy with Prince. They weren't tough screens. They needed to be much tougher. They were much better last night. He also went for it all on a dunk attempt that he couldn't get to go, but was fouled on. So after he was missing some layups that should have been dunks, I think somebody got into him and whispered, "Hey, Kai, just dunk it on these guys, please." Then he did have a rebound and a big throwdown. He had a dunk after a Kobe back and forth where he had a nice little underhand pass to Kobe Brown, who gave it back to him, who then Kai Jones, would put it away with, as he had 6 dunks in the ball game. Then there was a play where he lost the basketball after getting an offensive rebound, a nice hustle play. They trapped him. He couldn't find an open man. Probably should have been able to, but then Williams stole it back and lobbed it back to Kai for a dunk. He had another dunk off of a steal. Like, they were coming in droves. Like, it was Williams looking for him on some dunks and guys finding him running the floor. That was good to see from Kai Jones. But again, you got to take into account level of competition. If he didn't play this well last night, it would have been very, very concerning, considering the guys that were out there for the Brooklyn Nets, considering how limited they were with the guys who were available. Old Man Yen said, "I like Kai Jones. Seems like a good kid. Is he going to see the floor this season?" I don't think he's NBA ready at this point. Anybody that has an eye for scouting would know that his footwork isn't there, and the pick and roll game has to be better. He's just so raw, guys. I don't know. I don't think he's ahead of Mo Bamba and shouldn't be right now. I'm not sure the level of severity when it comes to the injury with Mo Bamba. I'll ask Law Murray about that when he joins. It could be something where if he was out for an extended period, maybe that would help Kai Jones get that two-way spot if he's already not the front runner for it because they need another big. It would make sense. I think he has the inside track to getting it in the same way I've been saying Terance Mann has the inside track to getting that starting 2 spot. We could talk about Terance Mann now. As Kai Jones, I mean, one more in here. Bastian Schweinsteiger said, "What's stopping Kai Jones from becoming Daniel Gafford? Literally just needs to run." No, literally he's not close to that yet, guys. Like, he is shying away from contact at times. His footwork on the block leaves a lot to be desired. Like, as much as he had those 6 dunks and was productive out there and ended up with 13 and 5, I'm telling you, he is not close to NBA ready if you know high-level ball. I'll confirm this with Law in a little bit. Coach Lou post-game, I think he knows what he's looking at with Kai Jones, somebody that needs a lot more reps, somebody that needs a lot more development out there. Being able to run and being a freak athlete and having that vertical presence isn't enough when you don't know how to use that athletic body yet in the NBA, and he clearly doesn't. I want him to get there. I'm rooting for him. I want him to get that 2-way contract. But you got to take a step back with the highlight dunks from last night, realize who he's going up against, and realize it's game 2. It was nice to see progress. Don't get me wrong. He needed to show and flash a game like that, but there's still a long way to go for him. Maddox says, you think the Clippers can make it to the finals last year? So he's just really going big picture. I don't know, Maddox. Why do you think that they could or couldn't make the NBA finals? Let me know if Kawhi plays 60 games in the regular season, and then we can talk about how far this team can go. Why don't we just take things back a little bit? Old man Yen saying high level balls while we're here, hearing from Adam. Wink. Look, I can't stress enough just how far off Kai still is from the fundamentals and just doing the little things the right way. The screens were better last night, but against NBA players and not guys from Brooklyn who were mini-me's out there, a bunch of smalls, that stuff still probably has to be improved upon in a major way before he gets out there. Jonathan Ing says, yeah, Skafford is more polished and looks like he knows what he is doing compared to Kai. Kai is still a deer in the headlights. Like, it's exciting to watch, and the dunks were fun last night, but make no mistake, this is a player, and it shows that he didn't start playing basketball until he was 15. He has potential. They have to hone into his skills, and he's got to improve in every facet of the game right now. I am absolutely rooting for the young man, though, because I love seeing the development and just from one game to the next, taking that coaching to heart, knowing you had to be better when it came to setting screens. That's non-negotiable. That is a prerequisite of being out there. That Mexican Nara said, I don't trust Bama's health, so Kai may need to play unless we trade Tucker to sign another center. At some point, it looks like the writing's on the wall. PJ Tucker will not be on this team for one reason or another. Here's the next topic I want to get into. Jonathan Ing brings it up. T-Mann played especially hard last night for a preseason game. He shot his threes with zero hesitation and played with swagger. Terance Mann was the best player on the floor, I think, the opening 5 minutes of the ball game. He ended up with 10 and 3. You said threes. He only took one. He did make it, but it was just one because he was getting downhill and driving to the basket and playing Terance Mann basketball. He started things off with a layup. Then he had a really great pass to Ivica Zubac, both of them near the block, and he found Big Zoo in tight quarters there for a layup. It was great to see that, touch on his pass, where Russell Westbrook there at times would fire a bullet pass to Ivica Zubac when he's 5 feet away. And then people would be like, well, why did Ivica Zubac catch that? It's like, well, he went fastball when you need to go change up there. Then Mann hit that three-pointer. Then he got a feed. The big man paid him back. A little high-low game. Ivica Zubac at the top of the key found Terance Mann down low for another easy one. Remember, Terance Mann, top 3 in the restricted area when it comes to field goal percentage the last 2 years. Top 3 in the NBA at guard position. The only guy that was better than him last year was Luka Doncic. The only guy that's better than him 2 years before, that would be De'Aaron Fox and Steph Curry. He was actually ahead of Luka Doncic that year. Terance Mann is elite at finishing at the basket. You say, well, everybody should be. They're not. It's not that easy. His body control is special there, and his touch around the basket. Speaking of Russell Westbrook, not everybody can do it. Trust me. Now, there was a point, I think it was in the second quarter, where Terance Mann had a layup in transition off of a Zoo block, or maybe late first quarter when everybody was really struggling, and that's when the Brooklyn Nets got back into the ball game. It was the Clippers up by as many as 18, and as Coach Lou put it last night, after the Clippers led by 18, Brooklyn got back into it and up by 3 at the half because of their ball pressure, because they were picking them up full court. Both teams were doing that to some extent. You were seeing guys step up and guard 94 feet. That was cool to see, but it really slowed down the Clippers offense. They couldn't get into things. The switching hurt them too. And it's just early preseason stuff that they're not used to yet. Jonathan says, I thought he shot more, LOL. I was in the corner area on the Nets bench side of front wave. Well, he didn't. He took 1 3. He made 1 3. It was still good to see. 2 other guys that took 3-pointers and made them last night. And I said this on Clips and Dip. I believe I made this prediction. I had Derek Jones and Chris Dunn making a 3-pointer. They both did. That was something I wanted to see when we did our game preview for this, myself and Chuck Mockler. Chris Dunn was 1 for 2. Derek Jones Jr., who unfortunately suffered a concussion, blow to the head, left the ball game, went into the locker room a little bit before the half, but he did knock down a 3 earlier, and we're hoping he's going to be okay. Speedy recovery, Derek Jones Jr. So 3 balls were raining. In that first quarter, the Clippers were 6 of 10. You can say when they were up 35-18 after 1 that their offense was rolling and they clicked in. Some of that was just due to some really hot shooting, and Brooklyn couldn't make anything. Clippers defense was very good, though, to start. Once again, setting the tone with their defense. People going back to the Kai Jones conversation. Bastian Schweinsteiger said Kai isn't there yet, but part of that is because he missed a year of basketball. Sure. Gafford was a second-round pick on a perennial losing team, and in an instant became a contributor on a finals team. Well, Gafford, no, I mean, Gafford, people knew, guys, for a while, especially Clippers fans, because they wanted to trade for him. Gafford looked good before he got to Dallas. This isn't something like he got to Dallas and all of a sudden it all came together. Like, that's not the case at all. The last 2 years with Washington, this was somebody who was like a 10-5, 10-7 guy out there on the floor. Gafford was good for a few years. This didn't come together all of a sudden. I'm sorry, Bastian. That is just a little bit inaccurate here. Manny Cellular says, Kai has too many defensive lapses. He does. Like, he's just, the game is obviously moving way too fast for him. Now, there were times last night where he was moving too fast for anybody else to catch him. Love seeing that. He does have, because of his verticality, because of his hops, I almost said Gafford there. No, he's not close to Gafford yet. My God. Kai Jones does have some utility there, but I'm afraid the negatives and his deficiencies in his game are far greater than his offensive prowess and just what he's capable of. So he'd be a net negative, I think, out there playing at the NBA level currently. Get him in the G League, let him develop, see how fast it happens. It could, like, here's the problem. You keep him with the big club, he's not going to be playing. Like, he's not going to get minutes. That doesn't help him. Guys in the G League is very competitive. All those guys, as Sindarius Thornwell said one time at Media Day, they're wolves down there. You go down there, guys are super hungry because they're all climbing and scratching and clawing over one another to get to the big leagues. So it is a great way to expedite someone's development. That's what we need to see from Kai Jones. Thoughts on Norman and Miller from that Mexican Nara. Norman Powell, 17 minutes, 2 of 5. Both of his makes were 3-pointers. I want to say both of them were on the right wing. Finished with 10 points because he got to the charity stripe and made all 4 of his free throws. While other guys were struggling, it was funny. We were talking about this on the broadcast, myself and Carlo Jimenez. Terance Mann went 1 for 4 at the free throw line, unexpectedly, out of the ordinary. Other guys were missing too, and I kept thinking it's the backdrop. The depth perception wasn't there because there weren't seats right behind the basket at Front Wave Arena, and maybe that affected them. I remember in March Madness a few years back, I forget where they were at. I think it was like the Jerry Jones Dome or something, so a place that wasn't used. It was a big stadium, and they used it for basketball because of March Madness in the Final Four, and everybody was missing everything. And that depth perception can throw you off. Some guys felt like that in the bubble in Orlando. Other guys, for whatever reason, it worked for. So I think it worked for Norman Powell last night, that backdrop and setting, and he's a San Diego guy. Didn't work for Terance Mann at the charity stripe. It was funny to see. But Powell overall, he looks good. I've seen enough. I'm telling you guys, I told you from the outset, bro, he wasn't an afterthought in Washington. Daniel Gafford. Yes, he was on the worst team in the NBA and was probably one of the better players on it. No, they weren't winning, but everybody knew Daniel Gafford is someone that has ability that could be a steal if you go get him. He was not an afterthought. A guy who is averaging 11 and 8 per ball game when he started 66 games in the 23-24 season. So he started how many games for Washington before he came over to Dallas? 45. I mean, the year before that in the 22-23 season, he played 78 games, started 47 for them, was averaging 9 and 6. Daniel Gafford was a known commodity. And his production, when you look at his numbers and stuff, it didn't go up tremendously when he went to Dallas. He went from averaging 11 and 5 to with Dallas 11 and a little bit less than 5. Like, I don't know what my guy is talking about here, Bastion, but I ain't here for the misinformation. You know that. I paid attention to Gafford for a while, and I wasn't shocked by anything that happened in Dallas. So, in going back to Norman Powell, as I got almost triggered there, he looks great, guys. And I've been telling you that if Kawhi's not available, I expect him to be in the starting lineup. That has always been my belief. I was talking about it with the guys from Talking Ship, Brandon Marcus, Matt Warren. Brandon disagreed with me. I said, I think he's going to be the guy. Whether or not I think he should be, I don't know. That's debatable. But I always felt like Coach Lue is going to go with him if he doesn't have Kawhi because there's just not enough scoring. It would be a big issue. You can talk about defensive issues with Norman Powell being out there next to James Harden, but if you don't have him offensively, where are you getting much production? Like it's concerning if Kawhi is not available. I think Coach Lue obviously has said before he has an affinity for guards, and if Norman Powell will guard like he's capable of, like he talked about with getting back to playing some of that defense he played. In fact, maybe I can find the quote for you because I found this really encouraging. I needed to hear this. I've been talking about this for years now with Norman Powell games since he was at UCLA, and he could play defense. We saw it with the Toronto Raptors too at the NBA level. So it wasn't just a college thing. Here's Norman Powell after, I think this was, post game after the game in Honolulu over the weekend. This would be on Saturday after he went 5 of 7, looked extremely in rhythm, took and made the first shot of the game. Here was Norman Powell post-game speaking with the media, speaking to exactly what I'm talking about here with his defensive potential.
Honing in on the defensive end, I think that's been the biggest thing. I've been so focused offensively, and being a power punch, but, they want me going back to that. I was talking about my earlier days when, I was guarding the ball, being a two-way player. So that's the thing that I'm really focused on, using my voice, being a leader on the defensive end, because everybody knows that I can score and put the ball in the basket. They're not questioning that, but can they count on me, to not make the mistakes off the ball and be a defensive anchor on that end, being solid, making the right reads, being in the right spots, communicating, talking, and that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm going to do. So that's where I see the biggest leap for me is on the defensive end, and I'm going to show that throughout these practices and the preseason games.
This is the formula for the Clippers being able to survive without Kawhi Leonard offensively, and then defensively with Powell being in there. He has to get back to playing better defense. And I believe him. Norman Powell is one of the hardest workers. When he says something like this, that coaches are trying to get it out of him, I think he'll get back to playing better defense. I do. I don't know if it's going to be anything to write home about, if he's going to make all defensive third team or something like that. I wouldn't expect that. Above average. How about slightly above average defense? I think last year he was still slightly below average, even though he was better than the year before. But Norman Powell is capable of, even with his size, because of his long arms, to stay with guys much better on the perimeter and not get caught ball watching. It can't be guys, making backdoor cuts on him and him getting lost with his man defensively. As for my man, that would be the great Law Murray of the Athletic. Saw him last night in San Diego. Told you he'd be joining us. And Law is now here on Clippers Talk Live for you guys. Law, what's good?
Man, I'm so washed today, bro.
Look at me. Look at my hair. No one's more washed than this right now. What time did you get home?
At least you got here, bro. Yeah, when this calendar year started, I definitely had more hair than I got now. So I ain't sobbing for you, bro.
All right. Yeah, no woe is me here. Well, I wanted to initially, we had talked about doing this a couple of days ago. I wanted to have you on specifically about what happened over the weekend with Kawhi Leonard. You wrote about it. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about what happened last night at the ball game. I'm trying to point out to people that Kai Jones is still pretty far away from being able to play at the NBA level and being successful there for a team that's trying to make the playoffs. Some people in here are telling me, Daniel Gafford was nothing until the Dallas Mavericks got him. He wasn't an NBA player. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? Daniel Gafford could play with Washington. Just because nobody watched him there doesn't mean he couldn't play. He didn't all of a sudden get a skill set. What have you noticed so far with Kai Jones? Because to his credit, he was much better last night than he was in Honolulu, and I've given him a ton of credit for the harder screens he set and just running the floor a little bit better, but he's still not ready yet.
I don't know why anyone bringing up Gaff and related to any pro center trying to simply make a team. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
That's crazy to me. Like, even as a rookie, like Daniel Gafford showed that he was an NBA player and only progressed from there. Washington was cheeks last year, but the thing with Washington is that they were even worse when they traded Gaff, because Gaff was so good at the two things that he wound up being good at in Dallas, which is protecting the rim and finishing everything that he got his hands on inside the restricted area. So we're not going to make that comparison. Like, I don't think people understand the minutes that we're talking about. Like, Kai has not played enough NBA basketball, period. Like, Kai has played 613 minutes since being drafted 3 drafts ago. So, like, we gotta, not even 3 drafts ago, 4 drafts ago. It's just supposed to be his 4th NBA season. I count years where guys don't play. It's just obviously they don't play those years. Kai Jones was a professional last year. He just didn't make it into an NBA game. He signed multiple NBA contracts. And that's what people got to understand. Like, the center position, and I kept on saying this, and to Kai's credit, Kai is an extremely enthusiastic young player, a guy who knows where he needs to catch up, a guy who knows where, he needs to earn the trust of his coaches and teammates, really to earn his own trust, because he talked last night about where his body was at and being able to trust him more. But even if people saw last night's game, the game that Kai played in the first half was not good enough. And Tyronn Lue, a guy who doesn't say much during games, told him at halftime some things that he needed to see Kai do better. And to Kai's credit, he picked up those things for the second half when the competition was slightly different. I say slightly because Brooklyn is in shambles right now with their roster situation, both in general and the fact that they still had, Nick Claxton out, Bojan Bogdanovic out. Like, the few pros, the few trustworthy guys that they have, a lot of those guys, weren't playing last night. So you got to take everything that you saw in Oceanside with a grain of salt as far as the Clippers and their confidence levels. But, I'll just tell you, Clippers players are looking for Kai to pick things up. On one hand, they're intrigued and they're encouraged and they want him to succeed. On the other hand, the backup center spot is in a similar spot now than it was 2 years ago when Moses Brown was the top backup center. And that was obviously a Clippers team that was playing using that center spot, punting the backup center spot on purpose until they realized midseason positionless is a scam and they might want to get a real veteran backup who knows what they're doing on the NBA floor. So that's the dilemma. like the physical tools are obvious. That's Kai was a first round pick for a reason. He's gotten multiple chances for a reason. But even coming out of Texas, there were two concerns with Kai Jones. One, his level of physicality, and two, his understanding of what to do defensively, especially at the center spot. So you can see the physical tools, but you also see the physical drawbacks. And you see that he is right now trying to play a game of catch up in front of everybody's eyes right now.
Yeah. And again, I commend him for taking some steps between the game in Honolulu and the game last night. Granted, some of it is personnel that was out there for the Brooklyn Nets, but keep going, Kai. I want to see him get that two-way spot, and I'm glad he's getting a shot. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, Clippers guys are intrigued with him.
I mean, he's getting a shot because they ain't got no choice, man. Like, I'm telling you, the backup center spot is in a really bad place right now. Like, they signed Mo Bamba, and I mean, I think Mo's going to be fine physically, but that's not the issue. Mo Bamba should not be the guy that you're like, oh, this is going to make everything stable. Like, again, we're talking about minutes in the NBA. Mo Bamba was a lottery pick in 2018. He's had one season out of 6 where he's played more than 1,000 minutes. And that season wasn't last year or the year before. So, you know, like, it's a spot where the Clippers are playing with fire. And, you know, the good thing is they got Zoo, but it's a spot where when you hear Tyronn Lue say things like, yeah, we're going to give young guys a chance to play. Well, it's because you ain't got no choice. Kobe Brown is going to have to play some 5. Kai Jones is a guy who's going to go from not playing a single NBA game last year to he might wind up on a 2-way contract being the second string center playing in the rotation as soon as 2 weeks from now. And what's 2 weeks from now, Adam?
I think opening night at a little place called the Intuit Dome
on ESPN. So we go on, the whole world go and see what it's like. I see you popped up on the screen, decisions to not bring back veteran centers who can't jump. And, you know, I think that's what it is. This is a team that needs to give guys these opportunities. You guys want to see young players play? Here it is. This is what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And there are going to be growing pains. Let's just put a button on this. Bastian Schweinsteiger, stop it. There are no parallels between him and Daniel Gafford. Just because he was a first-round pick, he couldn't play on the Charlotte Hornets, okay? Like, Gafford had his opportunity on a bad team and made the most of it. Kai was not able to do that. He's not in that place. We're rooting for him, but my goodness, there's no comparison. I got to keep moving here, Law. Are there any other takeaways from you last night, or is it too inconclusive considering the opponent and the guys that were missing for the Brooklyn Nets? Like, I enjoyed watching Jordan Miller just cook when he came into the ball game and look like Summer League Jordan Miller. Like, it's too easy for him against these guys. I want to see him against first units out there. I know it's not going to look like that. I just want to see what he can do. Is that asking too much?
Nah, I really think that second unit, there's going to be there's always, I'm going to say this, even if it's the best team in the league versus the New Zealand Breakers, I'm going to find something to, look at as far as who's doing what, how they're playing. I think that T. Lue being so transparent and forthcoming about the state of the second unit and what he's trying to look for, how he's trying to mix guys in and out, the fits of everything. Like, I think that there's some spots up for grabs. Like, nothing is set in stone, especially after the reliable guys, the guys that know what they're doing and will play to a certain level. Like, the second unit looked like holy hell. And it's something where I think the young guys are going to get a real opportunity. They got 3 more preseason games now to show what they can do. I think you're going to see Jordan Miller get a chance to maybe move up and see what he can do. I just think that he has put the time in and he deserves a look with the real pros. That's And that's not just because Jordan Miller's playing, has put some good tape out. The second unit looks unreliable at several positions right now. I think that it's unfortunate that Bones wasn't able to play, and maybe Bones is in a spot where he's going to be. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Bones has actually endeared himself to his teammates and the coaches a little bit. We just got to see when he can get back from the hip issues that he's dealing with. I think Chris Dunn is someone who everyone is feeling pretty good about. I think that they know he's going to defend his ass off. They know that he's going to try and take care of the basketball. Like he did a terrible job taking care of the basketball in Hawaii, but he cleaned that up last night.
He had the stock last night, the block into a steal.
Yeah, I mean, look, Chris is a defensive playmaker, and he knows how to play, and he's going to talk. He's going to talk his talk, and I think the team, doesn't have a lot of that. But they got to figure some things out. I think one of the players who it's just interesting to see what's going to happen is Kevin Porter. Like on one hand, I think that the team is really, they want to get him back in the rhythm. But just like Kai Jones, I think that there has been something of us, trying to get Kevin to play the way that he needs to play, both on the practice floor and as well when in these games. I think that's a work in progress. And again, you never know what's going to happen with Kevin's status. So, there's a pathway to Bones being in the rotation to start the year, depending on what happens with Kevin. Jordan is a player who he's got to see if he can, break through. Alondes Williams is a guy who, again, Alondes is a long shot to make the team, but he's impressed in the opportunities that he's gotten. I think, and I'm not surprised by that. Alondes was a conference player of the year his last year in college. He's been on multiple two-way contracts. He's a pro. It's just interesting to hear that Alondes, people want to, there are some people that might want to see Alondes get a bit of a push. The second unit is one that I think T. Lue, I can see him wanting a guy like Terance in that second unit. I think whatever unit Terance is in is going to be a plus to that unit. And whatever unit Terance isn't in, I think it's like that's where they're hoping they can get Kawhi back.
Lob Murray is our guest here on Clippers Talk, a Clippers Talk Live. Lob Murray, of course, of The Athletic, wrote a great piece over the weekend after Kawhi Leonard spoke at the half with the media in Honolulu. It's titled Kawhi Leonard on Clippers' Role Playing with James Harden and Uncertain Future. First of all, as we kind of pick this apart a little bit, your understanding of what Kawhi meant by saying, nobody had impressed him so far. I didn't think much of it because he was right before that talking about the young guys and kind of saying some glowing things, and then went into that. It's just Kawhi being Kawhi, right? I don't think it was shade.
Yeah, that's exactly what my editor said. That's exactly how he would have put it. It's never shade. It's just that people are assholes on the internet, and they think that if they said that or if they heard it, and they ain't used to being on teams, or they're used to hearing a bunch of bullshit from star players or any player for that matter, coach speak. They don't know how to take that. They're taken aback by it. Again, it's the same people who think that Kawhi doesn't have emotions, doesn't say anything, doesn't say enough for them. The people who are like, I know one star, he's going to be around and he's going to promote the team, and the other one's not. So, we have this thing where we criticize guys for not saying enough and not being open enough, not being honest enough, and then we'll turn right back around. And by we, I definitely don't mean I myself. I don't do this shit, but people who have my job do this. They'll turn right back around after building someone up. They'll tear them down. Oh, you shouldn't have said that. Oh, you should say that some other time. You're probably playing video games right now. You should be working on your game. It's that same crowd. So Kawhi is, and I wrote about this. Kawhi is about details. He's about championship standards. And yeah, the difference with this team and the other Clipper teams is this team has no business talking about being a legitimate championship contender. But that doesn't mean that guys who are wired to expect a certain level of play and a certain level of habits over the course of a year, especially at the beginning when you're laying your foundation and your orientation, it doesn't mean that you relax on those expectations. It doesn't mean that curb on your standards, that you compromise. And so, you know, I think you got to earn Kawhi's plaudits and trust. Kawhi can give you confidence that actually matters, or he can tell us some BS that he doesn't really believe right now. I think the main thing is he didn't start out saying, "Nah, no one stood out." No, he started out saying, "Hey, I'm watching the new guys. I'm watching the young guys. I'm watching to see how guys compete. I'm watching to see how guys, progress." But he might as well just told me it's been 1 week. What am I supposed to tell you?
Yeah.
You know.
Now, Hugh also asked him about playing the power forward position, playing the four.
Yeah.
And you are someone who has not gone away from everyone else leaning into it's a positionless league. You don't say things that you don't oversimplify like people have
Can I
done.
just say something on that real quick?
Oh yeah.
My whole thing with that is, and I know we talked about it some before. It's just one of my favorite subjects, and there's a reason I bring it up because I don't mean to just be a contrarian. People like talking about, oh, that's what it is now. It's like that's always been the game of basketball. There's never been rules in the game of basketball, especially at the pro level, that says one guy has to do this one thing all the time because that is their position, or this woman is the tallest on the floor. That's the only thing she's allowed to do on either end of the floor. Like even before there was a 3-point line laid down, like that's how the game has always been played. It's always been on offense, what's your role? And on defense, who can you guard? And it's always been about body types. We've always done this. Like the Chicago Bulls were a whole ass dynasty. Who was the point guard on that team? You right? Like more, you're either saying Mike or Scotty. Those dudes were handling the ball. They
Harper.
called Ron Harper the starting point guard, and it's like nominally that's the position he played, and he probably guarded more point guards than anybody else, right? Like their centers were nothing special. They had Dennis Rodman and Tony Kukoc playing often together. You would never, those guys were more modern. You know what I'm saying? Those guys could play the way they're playing in this era, the way they were playing back then. Even with the biggest bodies, the Hall of Famers, the brutes at those positions back in the 90s, they were fucking ripping off championships. So that's what I push back on. It's like people act like it's some newfound discovery that some, blogger at the Ringer made. It's like, no, like we've always been playing quote unquote positionless basketball. It's your applications of it, and the traditional positions are in place so that you can define what you need on a basketball court from a team standpoint, from a lineup standpoint, from a roster building standpoint. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
So Kawhi Leonard played the four all of last season. You guys established that, as he said, what was it last year?
Yeah, because he knows we talked about this shit before.
Yeah, you got rapport. I could not, as much as I understood where he was coming from with the comment about his teammates, I could not parcel out or understand exactly if he was making a point that maybe he shouldn't be playing the four, or if he was making a point that he needs to adjust the way he plays individually, because it's not so much him playing the four, it's just the way he plays where he runs far more than most players. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's something where I'm eager to see when he gets back on the floor. And again, the the forward to me is about body types. That's why I asked him the follow up. Can we kill this narrative about your knee being related to your position or who you're guarding? And he basically killed that. Like I feel like Kawhi has had preferences about who he plays next to. When he won his championship with San Antonio, you saw San Antonio, they were massive up front. Okay. Like they had Tim Duncan and usually another big. Like they broke in LaMarcus Aldridge next to Tim Duncan in Tim's last year playing professional basketball. We all saw what that was. In Toronto, that was 5 years ago. He played next to Pascal Siakam. And those guys always had either Serge Ibaka, Jonas Valanciunas, or Marc Gasol at the center spot. Obviously, JV was traded for Mark. When he came to the Clippers, you saw what it was. PG and Kawhi were at the 2 and the 3. They always had Zoo or Trez at the 5. Eventually, they cycled Trez out, or they had legitimate, or at least semi-legitimate power forwards. Marcus Morris got such a long run in LA. Got traded for a first-round pick here, got signed to a 4-year deal that just expired this past offseason. Because they always talked about the fit. Marcus did all the dirty work. Marcus's body got chewed up and spit out. That's why Marcus, by the end of his time with the Clippers, didn't look like he could do anything anymore.
Unsung hero to me in the 21 playoffs. You mentioned dirty work. He was all about it.
Exactly. Marcus did all that stuff. He did all the stuff that freed up Kawhi and PG to do the more comfortable things on both ends of the floor. So, especially defensively, because obviously offensively, Marcus was not in the paint there. But defensively, Marcus was the guy who guarded up. Marcus was the guy who banged and pushed and boxed out. Marcus's rebound numbers were awful individually, but when he was on the floor with those guys, the Clippers were a good rebounding team. It's the kind of player that Clippers don't have right now. The Clippers last year were a bad defensive rebounding team. They were solid in a lot of places defensively. They were a bad defensive rebounding team because now PG and Kawhi are your 3-4 instead of your 2-3. You don't have that extra guy boxing out. Everyone looks at rebounding numbers and it's like, oh, that guy can get up and get one. But there's 3 parts to rebounding. There's, first of all, forcing a damn miss to rebound in the first place. And then there's guys who check out, and you can't just have the big bodies. You have to have these guards who have to pursue instead of leaking out or ball watching. And then you have to secure the loose ball. You have to have a nose for the ball. And you talked about takeaways from last night. The Clippers did a lot of things well defensively. What they are continuing to show is that they're going to struggle with the rebounding. Now, Kawhi will help in some regard. Boardman gets paid. On the other hand, Boardman didn't grab as many rebounds as you'd like last year. So Derrick Jones Jr. is another one of those guys who the athleticism to pursue the basketball is there. The ability to be physical and box out is not ever been a part of Derrick's game. In fact, Derrick is better at the point of attack, and I don't see Derrick flying in there helping with more rebounds than he has in previous stops in his career. So I can see the Clippers being a bottom 5 defensive rebounding team, simply for the fact that if Zoo's challenging shots, who are the bodies keeping the other bodies off the glass? It's going to be an issue. Brooklyn had 14 offensive rebounds yesterday. I think the Warriors had an astronomical number, like 19 or something. So when we talk about Kawhi and his style of play, who he likes to play with, what he's going to have to do defensively, all those things are worth watching, because we all know that the roster that the Clippers bring into the regular season doesn't mean that that's going to be the roster that they have come February. I think the Clippers front office knows this, and they're going to, if something makes sense transactionally, it's something to watch for come the trade deadline, depending on how the Clippers are in relation to the rest of the league.
I guess to be more direct, based upon 2 things Kawhi has said in the past year. First, it was, I'll play it till we get a real one, talking about the 4. That was last year. And then talking with you Saturday, he mentioned we got to see if that's beneficial.
If that's beneficial for me.
Do you think he's asking for them to get a 4, or he's wondering if he needs to change the style of play?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, I think Kawhi knows who he would prefer to play with, but he also knows the other thing that he said is you got to control what you can control.
Right.
Like, we got to be realistic. The 4s that everyone wants to talk about, it's like you have to choose your style of play and your style of lineup based off of your available assets. People keep on talking about, hey, this guy's available, that guy's available. And that's an example of winning battles and setting yourself up to lose wars. It's like, Hey, great job. You captured that sandcastle. Now let's see you get hit by this surging hurricane. like I don't even mean to make a joke out of that. That is just a really explicit analogy that I have to use so people get what the heck I'm saying. Like there's a reason, they traded all their damn power forwards to get James Harden in the first place. It's like, hey, look, you guys complain about a point guard. We got too much depth at this position. Cool. We're going to give young guys a chance to play. We're going to change our style of play. And at the very least, we're going to make things easier for you on that end of the floor because you got a guy who you don't have to worry about hitting the ball. One thing you definitely will never hear, and I mentioned this in my article too, Kawhi has rarely ever been the guy who touches the ball the most on his team. We're not talking about taking the most shots. Again, offense in basketball isn't just, oh, you're taking shots. You have to set up those shots, right? It's like in football. In football, the star isn't always the quarterback, but the quarterback going to touch the ball more than everybody else, right? And so you can have an offense where it's like, I don't care who the weapons are. We got the kind of quarterback that can make all the reads, put the ball in the right places, and read the defense, and we're good. And you got some teams where that quarterback is limited, but they got some high-powered receivers. They got a back they can focus in on, and it's like they tell the quarterback just don't screw it up, right? The only head coach that Kawhi Leonard has ever had that gave the ball to Kawhi more than any of his teammates was Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers was like, we have Kawhi. And that's the thing with Doc. It's like Doc
And PG was missing a lot of that season.
he was missing a lot of that season, but we're talking about per game. I'm not talking about totals. I'm talking about give everybody, the equal opportunity from a rate standpoint, who touches the
Sure.
ball the most. You know what I mean? And so, and this is something that people don't give Doc credit for. Like, Doc is a legitimately very good regular season coach because that dude is going to coach to win games, no matter who he's got on his roster, no matter what the schedule looks like. Like, Doc has mastered, he's one of the best coaches of all time, if nothing else, because of what he's been able to do in the regular season, and part of what sets Doc up for failure is that shit that works in the regular season. We always say Doc doesn't adjust to how teams change or how teams change in the, within a series in the playoffs, right? But Doc was like, I got Kawhi. I don't care about everything else. The point guard is Pat Bev. Yeah, he's a role-playing point guard offensively. We're just going to have him, stand in the corner and do some things every now and again, even though Pat had Doc's trust. Paul George was like, I mean, what am I going to do with all my shooting guards? I'm going to have them come off of screens, come off of veers, sloppy actions, and we going to have them cook from there. Paul played the role that J.J. Redick and Ray Allen played in Doc's previous offenses. To great effect, mind you. Paul was not ineffective in his first year with the Clippers, right?
That team has become underrated. That first year Doc team that finished second in the West.
Yeah, it's their fault. So
Oh, it is.
People want,
that.
yeah, people want to underrate them. Yeah, I'm not going to feel sorry for them. But like my point being, Doc did that. Doc said, Kawhi, no one's ever made you a playmaker. We're making you a playmaker. It had a lot to do with Kawhi taking another step offensively in his game. T. Lue gets the job, and T. Lue heard as an assistant, we all saw the bubble fall out. T. Lue heard all the belly aching from guys saying that they didn't have a point guard. They want the ball in their hands more. T. Lue hired Chauncey Billups and told Paul George, yo ass going to be the point guard this year. Get ready. And Paul led the team in touches every year from then on until Russ got to the team because Paul was tired playing point guard. See how that works? So when Russ got to the team, Russ was the leader in touches per game, not Paul, not Kawhi. And then they get James, and James, he takes over, and he was the touch leader. Notice how we talking about three guys who aren't Kawhi Leonard, and James is still on the team. Paul and Russ aren't. Who's going to lead the team in touches? Kawhi or, James Harden? We all saw what it is. So,
yeah. So do you think it makes a difference regarding his tendency and his injury-prone ability, unfortunately, that we've seen the last 4 seasons, whether or not Kawhi plays the 4 or the 3, or is it just Kawhi and the way he plays isn't conducive to staying healthy because that's just who he is? That is a double-edged sword. It's what's made him great. It's what's made him a Hall of Famer. It also is what's so taxing on his body.
Yeah, and Kawhi is also well aware of what stage of career he's in. has continuously talked about, as I get older, what am I doing exactly? Who am I guarding? Am I guarding top guys? Am I guarding bigger guys? Are y'all gonna have me, chase the guys around that he shouldn't be chasing? Again, point of attack was a real issue for the Clippers. I think that's going to help the Clippers more than anything. Is they have Derrick Jones Jr., they have Chris Dunn. I know we talked about Terance Mann and related to point of attack, but again, when the going got tough, they knew they had issues guarding those guys. Who was guarding those guys late in games? It was Kawhi. Okay.
Kawhi, Jamal Murray, Kawhi on Steph late in games.
When they needed stops, it was like, we got to put Kawhi out there. You know what? Maybe Kawhi still gets out there every now and again. But I think the whole point of this offseason for the Clippers was, if nothing else, they got to get extra guys to help chase the smaller, tougher guys to guard. Put Terance on somebody else, because Terance, is a valuable defender, but not necessarily at that spot. And Terance didn't finish a lot of games because, again, you got so much talent on that team. Terance was the odd man out in a lot of closing lineups. That's what Terance Mann's goal is. A lot of people were talking about whether Terance will start or not. I think Terance is focusing on just closing games. You know what I'm saying? If he's the guy that needs to close games, he's out there. I think that's what Terance wants to do. When it comes to Kawhi, it's like, hey, we got you help. Derrick Jones Jr., who ain't going to help you with the four stuff, but he will help make sure that there's another guy at the point of attack. Same with Chris Dunn. Same with Nico Batum. Nico should not be playing a ton of minutes. I think Nico mentioned that they would have wanted to hold Nico out last night as well, but I think everyone agreed that it was better if Nico got some run in last night. So they have options that at those spots. And that's the thing. NBA defense is so much about who can you guard. Guys are going to make shots. Defense, you're going to have some breakdowns. The deep NBA basketball is so much different than every other sport, because y'all gonna watch these baseball playoff games or whatever, and y'all gonna get all excited when there's one change on the scoreboard, right? NBA basketball is you blink and you miss something. So if you can hold a team without scoring for minutes at a time, if you can stack stops together, that's what separates games. That's what gets you runs. That's what, in the playoffs, that's why the best teams are always the teams that can get the stops, period.
So do you think it would be advantageous for the Clippers to get a 4, as everyone's screaming about John Collins here in the comment section right now? Would it matter?
It's got to be the right kind of 4, because guess what? If you get a John Collins and you have an Ivica Zubac, then all of a sudden, who's guarding in the perimeter? Yeah. Ironically, Kawhi Leonard probably got to guard more out there, If you get a guy who conspires and hurts your spacing on one end of the floor just because you want to play two bigs, and, the skill set of those bigs don't complement each other as well as people think they are, that's where it's like, this isn't the 90s. Because in the 90s, you could get away with certain dudes not having a certain skill level. It's a lot harder to get away with that in 2024. That's where we talk about positional versatility. That's where we talk about and say, look, we don't care how big you are. Put the skill set into your game. That means those point guards in the 90s who couldn't shoot and were rewarded for being pass-first point guards, they ain't playing as much anymore. They're not getting drafted in the lottery anymore, okay? You're never going to see a Markelle Fultz, a guy that people are crying about not being in the league in 2024. You're never going to see, that dude was the first pick in the draft in 2017? That dude's not a lottery pick today. And it's not even a decade. It hasn't even been a decade, man. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. The dudes who couldn't guard a pick and roll and can't shoot outside the paint, if you got liabilities on both ends of the floor, yeah, if you're a big, you can't play. If you're a 6'7" power forward and all you do is be Reggie Evans, that guy is harder to play. They put you at the 5s just so they can find another guy who might have some skill. That's what we're talking about. And that's why it was described to me way back before the trade deadline. The Clippers know what they're missing. To get that guy, it's called a quote-unquote max contract player. Good luck.
Yeah, I know John Collins shot 37% from three last season, but it was on 3 attempts per game. To say that pairing him next to Ivica Zubac means you can still space the floor because John Collins can
Do you
shoot some.
see? Yeah. Do you see what the Utah Jazz are doing? The
Yeah.
Utah Jazz have decided John Collins is not only a 5, and he shouldn't share the floor with Walker Kessler, but they are prioritizing starting Kessler over JC this year. Salary be damned. That's the league that we're in. That's the value of things. If Utah, a team that does not have nearly as much incentive as winning as some other teams that we're talking about, is making that decision, then what do you think a team trying to win games is going to do?
So, lastly, what's your conclusion on whether or not Kawhi playing the 3 or the 4 is going to put more stress on his knee? Does it matter, or is it really just about Kawhi having to adjust his game as he gets older?
I think it matters. But I also think he's going to have to, the team has to adjust. Like, we're already seeing an adjustment. I think if Kawhi had total control of the situation, he'd probably be in camp and playing some preseason games right now.
Mm.
This is
Coach Lou
low.
said pregame yesterday something to the effect of, correct me on this, Law, but he said something like, even if it pisses off Kawhi right now, we have to protect him from himself type thing.
Yeah, it's not a new thing. That T. Lou has said that before. The front office has said that before. Hell, the front office said it. You were in the room. The front office said that a week before camp. They basically said it's up to Kawhi. He probably wants to go through this, but we're going to protect him. We're going to make sure he's 100% so that we can minimize the chance of this this popping up again. What does that mean exactly? It means that when I told y'all that people weren't worried about Kawhi having a setback, there's still people who think Kawhi had surgery after the Olympics or something. It's like people don't read and don't pay attention and don't talk about the things that we report, which that's on y'all. We just got to repeat it and say it over and over again. You know what I'm saying?
Bang it
I feel like
into heads.
I feel like Ric Flair when he was in WC, like in the late '80s. It's like we gonna tell y'all what it is, and we gonna go to your city, and we gonna treat you like you ain't never been treated before.
Woo!
Like that's what we got to do, man. Like we were. Again, I say we when I shouldn't say we. I'm gonna say I. If I say something, it's probably a reason because I don't like talking about a lot of stuff. So I don't just be, putting stuff out there. Like if he had a setback, we talk about it. We're going to know if he had a setback. He ain't have a setback. He doesn't have a new injury. He hasn't had a surgery. He didn't do some Andrew Bynum. I'm going to enjoy my summer shit. And get a procedure right before camp or anything like that. That's not what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about is a player who, yes, he's had multiple issues with the knee. Before the knee, he had multiple issues with his leg. He's not in his 20s anymore, and yet he's still a high-level player. There's not a lot of those guys. When he tore his ACL, we kept trying to tell people it's going to take longer than shorter because Kawhi isn't Kendrick Perkins, a guy coming back from an injury to just be a bit player, set some screens, bump some hips, and that's it. Like Kawhi's coming back to be to be at the top of the food chain. Like that's a different kind of return. It's a different kind of player, different kind of responsibilities. He might take a little longer than you think to get back, but when he gets back, he's not coming back to be a role player. He's coming back to be that dude. So there are adjustments, some we've never seen before, because it's not often that we're talking about this. Even when Klay Thompson came back from his injuries, like Klay Thompson ain't coming back to dribble the basketball and guard top guys. Klay Thompson coming back to play off of Draymond and Steph and to participate. You know what I'm saying? Bus drivers and bus riders. Which one is Kawhi, and what stage of career is Kawhi in? We're seeing things. Unfortunately, it sucks that the Clippers got to be a test tube, but we're seeing things that we don't have a lot of background and precedent for seeing. And Kawhi is very aware of that. The Clippers, unfortunately, are aware of that. And that means that, yes, there are adjustments to his game, but there's also a will for everybody to see Kawhi be the great player that he is and always has been.
He would be the great Law Murray of The Athletic. Again, follow him as I just put it on the screen for you guys at Law Murray, the NU. You got to be subscribed and plugged in as this Clippers season is getting started. The preseason has started. That means the season has started. There is information to be had. La Murray soaks it all up, dispenses it, makes it easy for you guys to read and understand, even with mercurial or murky press conferences with Kawhi Leonard and others. Law, thanks for coming on Clippers Talk once again. Enjoy Seattle. I'll see you at the Dome on Monday.
All right. Take care. I'm out. I got to write some things, y'all.
Get it done. Get it done. Guys, I can't say it enough. You got to follow La Murray. He is the best. And I hope he helped clear up some things with Kawhi Leonard there. A little bit of both. Him playing the 4 can be more taxing than playing the 3, but also his style of play. He needs to reel it in a little bit with just how much ground he has covered after he led the Clippers last season in miles ran per game at just over 2.5. This year, with Chris Dunn, with T-Mann hopefully getting more minutes, with Batum being back, with Derek Jones Jr. get healthy, we think that's going to mitigate some of it. Less pressure on Kawhi. Lawrence Frank has made this point over and over again. Insulate Kawhi. Don't make him have to guard the other team's best player, even in the highest leverage situations where he might be still the best defender on the team at his maximum effort. But Derek Jones Jr. is a pretty damn good option now too, and has said he's trying to become a defensive player of the year candidate. And he's going to ask Kawhi questions about doing that in this league. So there's a younger guy who's 27 who is hungry, who is great at guarding the point of attack and running around the perimeter. And, I mean, go watch the block he had on Steph Curry this past season. Like, Derek Jones Jr. is a freakish athlete that has been able to turn it into a skill set on the defensive end. It is impressive. I appreciate all you guys in here. I'm going to watch the Dodgers game. I'm going to check out. Want to get a Clippers Talk in for you. I'm sure I'll probably have another episode tomorrow, another Clippers Talk live. Not sure who I'll have on, but if you guys need a little bit more content, well, we had a pregame show. That's in the live section on YouTube. We had a postgame show in the live section on the YouTube. Trade Adam Oslin to the Shanghai Sharks. Harsh. We also had a Clippers After Dark as we were driving home from the game last night in San Diego, myself and Carlo Jimenez. That's also in the live YouTube section. So 3 more videos that you could be watching after this. And I think there was some good content in there as well. Thanks again to La Murray. I'm Adam Osland. You've been listening and watching another episode of Clippers Talk Live. Talk to you tomorrow.